welcome back to iPropertyRadio with Brian Fox and myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. In the PropTech hot seat today is Kieran Brennan, co-founder and CEO of LiveCosts, and of course, host of the LiveCosts podcast on iPropertyRadio. Kieran, you're very welcome. I haven't spoken to you in ages. How are you doing?
It's been a while, Carol. It has been a while. Yeah, no, I'm doing great and good to be here.
Tell me, how has COVID been for you and your clients?
Like everyone, a challenge, but there's definitely some positives to take out of it. I suppose pre-COVID, a lot of our customer base would have, I suppose their preference, Carol, would have been to see us face to face in terms of doing demonstrations, product training, implementations, all that type of stuff. But I suppose post-COVID now, there's an acceptance that we don't need to do that. So I suppose the positive for us as a company has been able to demo, onboard, train, support companies now across Ireland, UK, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, without actually having to have boots on the ground. So I suppose for us, that's a big plus.
As a technology company, I think COVID has really broken down the last resistance to what we have always known was kind of a borderless sector anyway, which is exciting. But actually just remind people who might not be familiar, what is LiveCosts and what is the offering?
So we're a cost control system for SME construction companies. So we live in between estimating and accounts. I suppose the best way to describe us is your estimating software will tell you what you expect to happen. Your accounting software will tell you what happened, which is too late, and we tell you what's happening. So we connect what's going on between estimating and final accounts. And general customer for us, Carol, would be your typical building company, developer, or those in the trades. So I suppose anyone that's buying a large volume of material, managing labour, subcontractors on a construction project would be a customer of ours.
Kieran, I'm tempted to ask what are the challenges, but unfortunately, we really know the challenges just seem to be hitting the construction industry. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, it feels like we were only there was an element of just having recovered before Brexit kicked in, and then, of course, COVID, and then we have this situation in the Ukraine. I need to stop saying situation. We have this war in the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Construction costs are all over the place. Consumer sentiment is all over the place. How are your clients navigating, say, new contracts at the moment?
I suppose all we can report back is what we're hearing on the ground, and what we're hearing on the ground is a lot of companies are just trying to focus on what they can control. So a lot of that stuff that we're talking about is at that macro level is like it's uncontrollable. A lot of it is out of the hands of the general contractor. So what can you control? I think there's a high level of organization starting to come into construction companies where it was no longer, let's say we put a practical example around this. We'll order that materials when we need it. That's not happening anymore. We're seeing a massive difference in people being far more organized, far more the project planning, the procurement plans, when we need labor, when we need material on site. It's just a much higher level organization around this, and I suppose the use of technology and enabling that has been huge. There's a massive, much higher level uptake on tech, I suppose, to deal with these issues. But I suppose just in summary, it's really focusing on what you can control. So making sure that you have your own processes in place. There's a lot of the stuff is just completely out of our control.
I think that's a really fair point, and it is the basic rule of management really to control the controllables. But in the current environment, what can an SME construction company do?
I think they can focus on process, and I suppose let's give you a typical example of that. Someone in a procurement seat, that's okay. Material prices, that's the big one at the moment, 40-year high. Once upon a time, we might send a request for quotation out to maybe 3 of our top 5 suppliers, and that might be location based and whatever it might be, and we take them prices in and we'd make a buying decision. That's been disrupted because bringing them pricing back in now, one of them might not be able to fulfill the full order. One of them is having issues with massive increase in old stock. One of them is buying in new stock, and that's putting the price up. And then what's happening is, on the practical side of things, is we're getting this place where we're going back to supply chain, not just once or twice to sharpen up these quotes, but we're going back constantly, and then we're in 10 email threads and 15 phone calls, and it's just the volume of work that's happening in what was a simple process once upon a time. It's just been massively increased. So what we can do is we can use technology, and I suppose it's easy for me to say sitting here in a construction technology seat, but it's the absolute truth. Use technology to streamline these processes, use technology to collect data, so there's a massive uptake now on companies starting to understand what is the impact of me having data at hand. So my answer, although be it a little bit biased, is use technology, understand your data, use technology, understand your processes, be able to monitor exactly what's going on across your company, and as you said, control what's in control of your company.
Yeah, it's certainly on the construction side, it doesn't feel like there's going to be a let up in the short term, and yet we're hearing reports in terms of, say, across the residential side, that there's a real shift in consumer sentiment out there, and yet we know that the demand is still going massively unsatisfied. So, for example, last week, Sherry Fitzgerald's Marion Finnegan came out and said that previous estimates of needing 35,000 new homes every year in Ireland are just way below that. And even Ronan Lyon's estimates of 50,000 per year are probably on the low side. And she suspects it's going to be somewhere between 50 and 60,000 per year over the next number of years. So even if we have a marketplace of price correction, the building will need to continue throughout, not like what we might have seen in previous downturns where activity stopped. Actually, that's a really unusual place for us to be in. Will the materials be there? How will the costs hamper that kind of progress that we need to see, not just on the residential side, but on the construction or on the commercial side as well?
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, you're right. The building has to go ahead, but who wants to build them? I suppose would be the question. As profits and margins get challenged, is there going to be a correction to a place where these companies are no longer profitable? I think that's the biggest challenge. Will it become a point where we get companies that do not want to deliver these types of projects? And I think that's where government are really going to have to step in and enable people to make sure we all going to make money. Every business is going to make money. I mean, we're hearing on the ground at the moment, Carol, like from our own customers, that they're having to go back to clients. They're tied into contracts. They're saying, listen, I need to bring this back to the table because, okay, I understand we're in a contract here, but I'm going to go bust. Mm-hmm. So what can we do? We can either work together here to complete this project and work together. And what we're hearing most of the time is that it's absolutely positive and people understand it because they can clearly see where these price increases are coming from. So, I mean, what happens in a case where the companies, the developers and the builders just get to a point where they say this is just no longer profitable?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because we have spoken to some cost consultants, and one of the things we're seeing at the moment is that it's almost too early to tell yet where things are perhaps in mediation right now. It's too early to tell, are they likely to end up in litigation? But you're right, we have contracts that just are not capable of being fulfilled and leaving both parties still standing. And that's a really unusual situation to be in en masse. And we're in that situation not just for private projects, but for public procurement as well. So actually the state needs to step up and show a bit of leadership in this at the moment, which, to be fair, I think they're just getting their heads around now. But we're not seeing the action that we need to see. But what's interesting from a LiveCosts perspective is that you're looking at this from the Irish marketplace, but you're also across the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. So actually, I suppose not just looking at the Irish marketplace, are there similar challenges being faced in the other jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, the UK for us would be a big one, and they're facing similar challenges. Housing crisis, well documented. The dynamics of the market is quite similar to ours. I mean, they've got about 300,000 construction companies registered in the UK market. 99% of those are SMEs, which is interesting, and they're the deliverers of these projects, if you want to call it. They're the buyers of the material, they're supplying the labor, so they've got the biggest challenge, and they're the ones that are feeling the real pressure, and they're the ones that are being squeezed. So a lot of time when this sort of stuff happens, it is unfortunately the SME company that is the one that goes bust because they're not protected by sophisticated legals, and they're not haven't got a great understanding of the contracts that they're actually signing, and that's what's happening across there. So they're very similar challenges, very similar markets in how they operate.
I suppose the challenges seem like shared challenges, and it feels like only 3 and 4 years ago, our biggest challenges really were around labour and getting access to labour. It just, we're not seeing where those challenges are likely to be addressed. It doesn't feel like they're ones that can be addressed, and yet we have construction suppliers coming in and recording record profits, which is really at odds with the experience then that's happening across the industry. Is that something that's global as well?
Yeah, as a technology company, we see a lot of fluctuation around material data. It's something that we're working on as a business model for years coming forward. At the moment, we're in that position of compiling, aggregating, understanding the data, deploying some machine learning to the data, so we can actually understand it, so that we can share that with the industry eventually. What we're seeing is just volatile. It's highly fluctuating, no consistency to it. We can't make much sense of it. So I suppose we can't point fingers and we can't say there's been some profiteering, but it'd be too early for us to say that. But it would look like it's just a difficult one to read, Carol. It really is. It's really difficult to read and understand what's gone out there anymore, because I suppose it's just a perfect storm, isn't it? There's so much happening around, and I think it will come out in the wash eventually, and I think things will settle down.
It is the perfect storm, but one thing we've seen is that it's also been the perfect environment for the introduction for a number of property technology and construction technology companies like yourself. And LiveCosts are, not just are you operating in so many different regions across the world now, but you've really been representing Ireland on a global stage of prop tech as well. So since you and I last spoke, the company has been through a really interesting transition. So you might just talk us through the journey that you've taken in terms of the accelerator program that you've been on in London.
Yeah, so we started to gain some traction through COVID in the UK market, which was really interesting to us. And I suppose one thing we didn't have in the UK was we didn't have a strong network. So we looked to partner with some venture capitalists, industry experts, and we looked around at some options to basically get us some access to industry, I suppose, on the ground in the UK. PyLabs are a venture capitalists based in London. They run a what's called a growth accelerator. So it's competitive, about 1,000 applications, about 47 countries applied for 10 positions. We were the only Irish representative there, so companies from Israel and Austria and Norway, and we had a couple from the UK. So basically a 16-week challenge to basically essentially pull the business apart, Carol, I suppose, and piece it back together to make sure that you are ready for scale. And we've just come off the back of that in the last few weeks, and it's been interesting. It's been an interesting journey, and it's opened up a lot of doors to the wider international construction and prop tech venture capital ecosystem, which is interesting space. It really is. And as the markets are volatile, there's a lot of investment coming into construction tech, because I think a lot of people have realized that, especially in the place we are with the SMEs, is that it's finally going to happen. Like, these guys are finally about to be digitized, and it's going to be a hot space over the next 5 years or so.
Congratulations to the company, because it is a huge achievement. But you're at a really exciting kind of edge of this as well, because over the years monitoring prop tech from 2015, 2016, I've always been so aware that property is down to the buying and selling and essentially the management of the built environment. But all of that can only happen if it's built. So actually it all comes back to construction if we don't address these problems at construction. So whether it's ESG, whether it's margins, no matter what we're looking at, the problems always have to be addressed when building and delivering the built environment, because only then can everything else be layered on top of it. And I think that there's been a huge VC turn in the last 3 years understanding this, and that has coincided with the industry waking up to the power of data, and these being ever squeezed by these margins means actually every bit of information that's actionable is now valuable. And that just wasn't the case 10 years ago. So it's a really interesting time. What are the plans? What's the growth forecast for LiveCosts?
I mean, we're thinking globally. Always have been from the start. We didn't set off on this journey as a let's build a solution for one market. I mean, what's really interesting about what we do, Carl, is we could be speaking to a company in Mullingar at 2:00 and 3:00 speaking to a similar company in Johannesburg, and then 6:00 that evening a similar company in Sydney, and it's the same problems. It's the exact same problems. We hear it's an international set of problems that can be solved by a simple technology workflow, which that excites us. It means that there is no ceiling to what we can actually go and do and achieve. So there's no real there's nothing that we hear across these companies in different regions that is any way different. So that makes our business very scalable, and it makes our opportunity big. So our vision for the next 3 and 5 years would be to go and scale that. The UK is obviously our primary target. We've got a good presence here in Ireland. It's been a great test bed for us. Some of the feedback we got early on from Irish companies was brilliant, and they basically formed the product, and that product is now being pushed across these different regions. So for us, obviously UK focus on FURS. It's a big market for us, and then we'll start to push into these other regions at scale over the next 3 years.
Kieran, any advice for founders who are not quite at that stage yet?
Yeah, team. I'm huge on team. So surround yourself with people that are more intelligent than you. Surround yourself with people that can plug your weak spots, and build that team out. I'm all about team, Carol.
Amazing. Listen, congratulations on what's been achieved. I look forward to see what comes next from yourself and the team. That was Kieran Brennan, co-founder and CEO of LiveCosts, and of course the host of the LiveCosts podcast here on iPropertyRadio. And that's it from the PropTech Hot Seat this week. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Until next time, thanks for listening, and my thanks to Breed and the Hear Me Roar production team, and to Luke Delaney on sound for Dublin South FM. Thank you. Take care.